My name's Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Today is November 21st, 2025. Welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Field Report South America. It's been a busy week, a lot going on in the markets, and talked to our customers in South America, and Friday Field Report is to keep you updated on what's going on. We're going to start talking a little bit about planting progress. Headline, there's no more delays to planting in South America. We'll look at a few pictures from customers down there, and then we'll wrap up talking about the 7-day rain forecast or weather forecast for South America. So let's jump into it. Let me go ahead and share the screen. This is the report straight off the CONAB website, and let me grab a marker here that we can mark this up. Let's see what color. Let's go with blue. That should work. So you don't need to worry if you don't speak Portuguese. I'm here for that. So here's this column is the 5-year average of the last 5 years, and 67.2% planted is that average. These states, these 12 states, represent 96% of Brazil's soybean acreage. So the historic average for this time of year would be 67.2%, and they're actually at 69% as of when this report came out on Monday. So not quite the home stretch of planting, but over 70% by now that we have a few more days go by. A lot of spots of dry weather still this week or shorter term over the weekend, but then we're going to look at the accumulated rains the next 7 days, and you'll see that there is more rain coming. So there's no more a delayed planting story in Brazil, so then that brings question of yields. And I know pictures can be deceiving, but let's just take a look at some pictures. When the soybean field looks like that, it's tough to be too bearish. This is from north central Mato Grosso, so the state of Mato Grosso, north central Mato Grosso. I've seen other pictures. They'll look a lot like that. You can see they got the nodules. Pretty good root system, but it looks a little shallow on the roots. But I mean, it's a good looking crop. That's the long and the short of it. It's a good looking crop. Before we talk about weather, I do want to actually talk a little bit about basis. So we'll just leave the picture of the beans on the screen there, and we'll talk a little bit about soybean basis. So what we saw on the Chicago Board of Trade was we saw some lows in August, and then it rallied up kind of the middle of the range. And then we have this last leg up. Basically November, we gapped up and then we rallied. Big old, gapped up to close to 11, depending on which contract you're looking at, close to 11, rallied up to the mid 11s. And then now have a little bit softer trade, had some finicky trade at the beginning of the week. But what's interesting is if we just look at that rally, so we've had, let's just call it from the middle of the range to the high tick, that's about $1. It would be the size of that rally. And if you would go back to the basis in Brazil, so this is the export premiums, this is how much soybeans are worth on the export market. If you go back to those lows, those August lows, the highest that basis got, or that premium got, that export premium for harvest delivery. So we're looking at basis for their next crop when they're gonna have real competitive soybeans. So the highest that got was 80 cents over. So if you want to just think of like the cash market in Brazil, or the premiums, at the low water mark for Chicago, we got to 80 cents over. And then in the middle of that range, those mid 10s, 1020, 1040, 1050, those mid 10s in the middle of the range, we traded in a pretty tight soybean range until all of 2025 until November. So that tight range, right in the middle of that range, we were hovering around 60 cents over for soybeans at harvest delivery. So a plus 60 basis would be the harvest delivery soybean premiums in Brazil. On this last leg up, so we gapped up to 11, then we ran. So at a $1 rally, depending on exactly where you peg it, but almost $1 rally at the Chicago Board of Trade, and 65 cents of that came off of the basis down there. So if you were to say how much is the price of this rally, how much was captured by the Brazilian premium market? So Chicago goes up $1, how much of that's captured? Maybe 30 cents. Basically, basically selling at the upper end of the previous range with that 60 cents basis was probably a better sale, or pretty close to a better sale than it was this last leg up. The point that I wanted to make with that is we're not seeing out of Brazil, we're not seeing this huge momentum where soybeans rally and their basis rallies to where, oh, there's this tremendous amount of demand. Basically, they're saying there's going to be plenty of soybeans. So if Chicago wants to rally, they can do whatever they want, but there's going to be plenty of soybeans. I'm not going to bid up to get soybeans out of Brazil. Yes, we have seen some friendly basis push here in the States, especially around export markets and crush markets. We have strong crush numbers, but there's just going to be a lot of soybeans right around the corner, and Brazil's cheaper, and they're probably going to be quite a bit cheaper. So that's just something to be cautious about. As we look at the map, I want to pull up the map now, and I want to mark it up a little bit. First of all, this is the accumulated rain over the next 7 days. Let me get red here so we can mark it up. The pictures that you saw that I showed are from about that region, maybe even a tad farther south, but they're from about that region of Mato Grosso. And then this next little story I'm going to tell, it's from this region here of Minas Gerais. And I wanted to just quickly tell a little anecdote from some customers that I have in this part, just because it's interesting to kind of hear how they're thinking about markets. So they're right there in that corner. And just so you understand, this is so if you go to São Paulo and Minas, those are very old agricultural regions, but they're also very diversified. So they do coffee and sugarcane and soybeans and corn and livestock, and it's very diversified. In this particular operation that I'm mentioning, they are also very diversified. They also have a lot of center pivots. So they're doing, depending on how they work their rotations, they're doing 3 crops a year. You know, they have a combination of wheat and corn and soybeans and coffee, and sometimes they'll do some other small grains as rotation. So it's a very diverse operation, but corn and soybeans is definitely part of the mix. And they have a lot of it is under center pivots, and they do some seed and some seed corn. But as it goes, you don't have 100, usually people don't have 100% under center pivots. So of their soybean acres, roughly half are under irrigation, and roughly half are dry land. So that's just, I'm just painting a picture for you so you kind of understand the nature of this operation. And logistically, they're in kind of this interesting spot where they can go to the export market, but they also have quite a bit to their west. They have quite a bit of feed. To their south, they have a pretty big export market, and they have some crush facilities around them. So they're in a very interesting sweet spot logistically, to where basically the tug of war between exports and domestic market, they feel that firsthand. So it'd be like, let's say you're close to the Mississippi River, but you also have a crushing plant. So it's the crushers that are bidding up, or it's the export market. You can feel that. So I'm just painting a picture so you kind of understand this operation. And I was going over their marketing plan with them. We were talking about this tough situation that we're in. Typically, we want to get some forward pricing done, and we haven't quite gotten that done. And we were kind of putting together, how should we navigate this market? So up with an average well over 11, on this last leg up, we just layered into sales. So they've got some hedges on for down the road. And so they have some coverage. And then we're trying to decide, should we go ahead and forward price these bushels, or should we wait? How should we handle kind of this remainder? And I just wanted to kind of paint this picture for you as farmers are making these decisions. So we've got some solid hedges on. They've protected the board of trade price here close to the highs. Check. We've got that done, but we still have some bushels to sell, and we're undersold on the cash market, so to speak. How aggressively should we be on the cash market? as the basis just absolutely collapsed by 65 cents over the last 3 weeks. Should I just say, hey, it's time to sell, we're selling, or should we hold off? And this was kind of the thought process as we work through it. This is what we got to for them. And this is, again, if you make grain marketing decisions, it's my firm belief that good grain marketing is a combination of the opportunities of your farm and the needs, the opportunities of the market and the needs of your farm. So that's how we're piecing this together. And they're saying, listen, our region, we have beans under center pivots, but our region is leading the charge on this delayed planting. We are typically done by now, and there's people that haven't even started. So locally, we are way behind pace on soybean planting. And then I said, do you have a production concern? Are you worried that there's going to be a production issue? And they said, no, not yet. We could still plant and get a full crop. But half of our beans under the center pivot, they're doing great. They're doing fine. We planted them way early. And then we haven't even started on our dryland beans. We still expect to raise the same amount, but how am I going to manage this market? And then what do I do with my hedges? Should I, rip those off and sell in the cash market the beans I know I'm going to have? How should I piece together the cash part of this thing? So what we came to was, listen, you have an interesting outlier, which is you have soybeans under center pivots that were planted in September that are going to be at the front of the line in this. They're very likely going to be very desirable because you're going to be picking these in January, and the bulk of harvest in Brazil is maybe coming out a little bit late. So you have a chance to sell beans right off the combine, almost as if you had stored them for a year, and just get that last basis push in case there's a demand for beans. That's a short list of people that are going to have those beans. So let's hold on to those center pivot beans. Let's not sell those now, even though we would typically be forward pricing some, because typically you have a bad harvest basis. But we've already seen an adjustment down in the basis, and we could very likely squeeze those in on a positive basis. We can get a basis bid. We're not guaranteed, but let's squeeze those in January. Let's just plan on selling those straight off the combine. And then we got our hedges that are well placed, covering all that dryland stuff, all that stuff that is going to be planted later. And you're maybe iffy on production right now. You're expecting a full crop, but we're a little iffy about forward pricing some of that dryland stuff because it hasn't even been planted. Plus, chances are you're going to be competing with everybody and his brother because those are going to come out late. So what are we going to do with those? Well, they have some storage. We've got hedges on. We're going to kind of kick that can down the road and just plan on probably tucking those bushels away in the bin. Now, I know that this specific story isn't, you don't have, this was a specific situation from a customer in Brazil. The reason I wanted to paint that picture for you is actually twofold. Number one, this is how you need to be thinking about markets. It's not the same. Brazil, South America produces twice as many soybeans as the US. The same tricks and the way that the market works 30, 40 years ago isn't the same now. There's a lot of soybeans out of South America. You need to be figuring out how to put your beans in the global market when they're dear from a basis standpoint, and how to figure out price protections to get your best average. That's the right way to think about grain marketing. And the second thing that I wanted to point out about that is there's no expectation of reduced production. I've not talked to a single farmer who said, I'm going to have less bushels to sell. What there is kind of this mismatched shape. This delayed in planting kind of created this window where there will be some early beans out of Brazil, and then there will be a little bit less beans, and then there will be all of the rest of the beans. And figuring out that delivery, I really think is critical. But current prices, even those early beans, are probably going to be more cheaper on the export market. So beginning in January, that's 6 weeks away, there's going to be beans out of Brazil that are being harvested And I think those are going to go straight to the export market, or maybe there will be a basis tug of war to keep some of those to keep crush working. But I think there's going to be, those early beans in Brazil, they're going to get to that export market quick. Now, the full volume of beans is later on down the road, but it's just being mindful of those nuances can really make a difference as you piece together your marketing plan and your strategy. So, rains are expected. I'm having a tough time being too bullish on soybeans shorter term. I think, there's rain in the forecast. We got to run up. A lot of times markets need to have a little bit of a correction. Now, the crop's not guaranteed. We're going to start getting to the end of planting. We're going to start looking at conditions. So we're going to start kind of looking at the development, what phase they are developmentally, when we have that weather concern. So probably 1 or 2 more weeks still kind of focused on planting. Then we'll be all in on tracking the development of this crop. You can have crop loss if they say, beans are made in August in the US. Well, beans are made in January in Brazil for the most part, although some beans are going to be early and there's going to be combines rolling, but most of the Brazilian crop's going to be at weather risk between Christmas and the first part of January. So there's still a weather story. There still could be a bullish story, but just shorter term, there's rain forecasted, planting pace is caught up out of South America. Exports out of the US are a little sheepish. We're not sure we're going to get the 20 million metric tons. At least I'm not convinced of that yet. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot to track. Thank you for watching this video, and reach out if you are looking for any grain marketing consulting help. Have a great weekend and successful next week.